in Arabic, Laddah means pleasure. And obviously, there are a lot of different ways that we could define pleasure and what a pleasurable experience is and what it means to experience pleasure in somebody's voice. Obviously, some voices are more pleasurable than others, and some voices actually grate on one's ears. But generally, it's really talking about sexual pleasure. It's talking about the experience of arousal and something that incites amorous feelings towards another. Voices can be very seductive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the women not to speak seductively in the Quran, to speak forcibly with men, and to keep their voices at a tone that's appropriate. Whispering is obviously an intimate way to speak, and people whisper when they're being intimate. So that's basically, it's not permissible for you to take any type of taladdud or this pleasurable experience from somebody's voice, whether it's on the telephone, whether it's, and people have to just know themselves. But obviously Islam, one of the 6 universals, or if you want to, dignity is sometimes not included in that, but one of the 6 universals is the protection of family, or nasab. And so Islam, you know, the religion itself has a lot of checks and balances to ensure that that protection won't be compromised. And the other is obviously the protection of the religion itself. And certainly there are many hadiths about the dangers of male and female loose mixing and things like that. And adab, decorum, was a very important aspect of Islamic civilization. And in many ways, modern people are they're just very crude in relation to the earlier peoples. And this is one of the areas in how we interact, learning how to interact on the one hand where it's natural, because there's certain types of interaction that actually do the opposite of what's intended. In other words, the artificiality is so predominant in the exchange that it actually focuses on the very thing that it's meant not to bring about. So, and then he also says, just listening to the makhufa, or somebody who the majority of people are not stunning, or, I mean, stunning faces are out there, but they're few and far between. But there are people that do have those impact on people. And usually the veil was mentioned for women that really do turn heads, so to speak. And so that's what he's really talking about. Very, very beautiful women that have an effect on the hearts of men. And the same is true the other way around as well. So, but men obviously tend to be more attracted to the visual aspect of that. And you know, the Arabs say, وَالْأُذُنُ تَعْشَقُ قَبْلَ الْعَيْنِ أَحْيَانًا, that the ear can have ishq before the eye in some cases. So don't underestimate the power of the human voice. And generally, you know, in pre-Islamic cultures, the mixing was very, very limited. And women did, like women in every civilization, they go about their business. And even the Prophet ﷺ's wives, who were told to stay within their homes, were nonetheless allowed to go out for their needs. In a healthy and spiritual culture, people do not have this need to go outside. The Prophet ﷺ said, نِعْمَ صَوْمَعَةُ الْبَيْتِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. You know, what a blessed monastery is the house of the believer. That if you're spiritually healthy, you don't need all this stimulation. But people that aren't well, That's what they need. They're going out trying to find something out there that's actually to fill a vacuum that's in here. And just like you can eat and get satiated, it's a temporary satiety, and then you're hungry again. Well, that vacuum that's a spiritual vacuum cannot be filled by other than what is permanent, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whenever it tries to be filled with something that's impermanent, it always creates the desire and the yearning. It wants to go back again to, and then the stimulation threshold gets higher and higher. So that's really what he's talking about. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu in the Muwatta, he was asked about greeting even the ajnabi woman, and he said, if it's mutajalla, la akrahu dharik, it doesn't bother me. If she's an older, mature woman, and the mutajalla is a woman who is what to put in Jane Austen's terms, is past her bloom. That's the woman that is, the face has become mature. It's not the young, youthful face that is attractive to men. But Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu said, لِكُلِّ سَاقِطَ لَاقِطَ. That everybody, that again, people are attracted and to different, people have different attractions, so he warned about that. But he said if it was a young woman, he said, لَا أُحِبُّ ذَلِكَ. And this is, again, the early community were very careful about saying this is halal or this is haram, because they didn't want to fall under that prohibition. The Quran, وَلَا تَقُولُوا تَصِفُ أَلْسِنَتُكُمُ الْكَذِبِ. Don't say, and your tongues are lying when they say هَذَا حَلَالٌ وَهَذَا حَرَامٌ. Don't do that. And that's why the early community did not do that. They were very, very wary of doing that. And Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah has a wonderful bahath in his book, A'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, called On the Impermissibility of Calling a Fatwa the Hukm of Allah. In other words, the fatwa is a legal opinion. It's not the hukm of Allah. You cannot, if it's an ijtihad issue, you cannot say that this is the hukm of Allah. And this is why the ulama differentiated traditionally between fiqh and between sharia. The sharia is Allah's way. The fiqh is the human understanding of the sharia. And so that was an important differentiation that the later ulama compromised on, holding the community together. So that was their ijtihad as well. But that early community, you will see that. They usually say, لَا يَعْجُبُنِي هَذَا أَكْرَهُ ذَلِكَ. They didn't want to say, if they didn't have a nas sarih, a clear injunction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were very, very careful about saying this is halal or this is haram. Imam Malik was also asked about, in the Muwatta, on the section on eating, he was asked about whether or not a man could have his wife sit with his guests. And he said as long as the decorum was observed, as long as there was adab in that majlis, then he didn't see any harm in that. But if men are going to be looking and checking out and doing those things, that's another thing. Most of the later ulama, in fact very early on, started saying fasad al-zaman, like the time is corrupt, meaning that there's an omission there, which means the people of the time are corrupt. So fasada ahlu zaman. And because of the corruption of the people, they tended to say, no, you should have complete separation because the hearts aren't the way they were before and things like that. Again, these are ijtihadats. In the West, we're in situations that are very different from these traditional societies, and those are the things that we have to work out as a community about how we can be, again, true to the thawabit, to those things that are fixed and permanent in our religion, and also amenable to the mutaghayyarat, to those things that are temporal and change, the a'raf, the customs, the norms, the cultural aspects of a community. Tfaddal. Oh, and also looking then at the tyrant, with being pleased with a tyrant. So unfortunately, you will see the amazing obsequiousness around tyrants. And it's very unfair to tyrants, but they cultivate it. And if they don't get that, they often are very ruthless in dealing with the people. Ibn al-Mubarak, radiallahu anhu, one of the great muhaddithin and great scholars of the early period from Khurasan, he was asked, what is tawadu'? Like, ma huwa tawadu'? And he said, at-takabburu 'inda ahl al-mal. It is to be arrogant around the people of wealth. Because everybody's humble around the people of wealth. So if you're not humble around the people of wealth, then you have the possibility for real humility. So people around rulers are even worse because there's power and wealth. And so just to be around these people, if you go into their presence, I mean, definitely the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever enters into the presence of a sultan, there will be fitna that happens from that. It's just the nature of the thing. And then the court, and the nature of a court is very, very tricky. The skullduggery around political animals, and they don't call them political animals for nothing. So you don't have best friends in politics, you have beast friends. And so if you're around those people, they will undermine you, there's a lot of si'aya, there's a lot of envy and jealousy, because they're the opposite of the people of powerlessness that are trying to purify themselves from all of these diseases of the heart. These are people that have completely capitulated to the diseases of their heart. So he's warning about being around these people and looking at them with any pleasure. And jabir it's a type of fi'il, it's a hyperbolic form for the jabbar, which is also hyperbolic as well. So it just means a tyrant, or the jabbar is يجبر الناس على ما يريد, like they impose and force people by fiat to do things that they might not want to do. And then to dislike these people is part of faith. So to dislike, to loathe the tyrant is actually part of faith. So if you have love in your heart for a tyrant, something's seriously wrong with your iman. بغضهم wajib. You cannot love the people of oppression. And now obviously there's a level, and I wrote about this in the Du'a Nasiri, there is a spiritual maqam of differentiating between the bughd of the embodiment of what is sinful, and then allowing the possibility for guidance, which is loving the creation of Allah, or the essence of every human being. Because the essence of every human being is potentiality for knowledge of Allah and submission to Allah. And that differentiation is very subtle differentiation, and that was definitely, the Prophet ﷺ was in that maqam because he always wanted people's guidance. He did not want the destruction of people. In fact, Nuh alayhi salam, and this is mentioned in the commentaries, did not imprecate against his people until Allah told them that they would not believe. And at the point that he lost hope in their belief was the point that he actually imprecated against them. But if you look in the dua, immediately after he asks for their destruction, he asks Allah to forgive him. So it's very dangerous to imprecate against anybody, and you have to think twice before you do that. It is permissible to make dua against the tyrants, and it's better to do that with general terms and not with specific terms. Don't use specific names and things like that. It's better like Allahumma ahmi ahad al-sham, Allahumma اجعل كيد الكائدين عليهم في نحورهم, speaking more in generals than getting into the specifics, because you don't know people's ends, and you don't know what Allah wants with people. And the people in power are also in a very difficult position. It's very easy to condemn people in power, but the reality of it is, and this is something very hard for people to grapple with, the reality of the people of power, of the Ahl al-Zahir, is, according to Imam al-Tartushi, because of the mercy of God, they tend to be the least corruptible people from the people of Zahir. In other words, if you took other people in the same society from Ahl al-Zahir and put them in the same position, they would be worse than them. And that's from the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He tends to take the least corruptible people from the Ahl al-Zahir. And Abu Bakr al-Tartushi says he doesn't put the people of Batin in those positions out of his love for them, because of the profoundly corruptible nature of being in those positions. So it's very rare for people to get into positions of power and not be susceptible to corruption, which is why, in my opinion, the best types of rulers are kings. I would much rather be under a constitutional monarchy than a democracy or a tyranny. And the reason for that is that kings are the least corruptible people. They're the least susceptible to corruption. Because a king, he's either corrupt in and of himself, but you cannot corrupt a king. You can't bribe him with money. You can't bribe him with power. You can't bribe him with women. You can't bribe him with any of the susceptible things of dunya, because he has it all, and he's had it all since he was in the palace. They grow up in the palace. They grow up around every whim being answered. So if you get a righteous king, it's something amazing. But people that get into power, who are outside of power, those people are so easily corrupted by power, just happens so quick. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ni'mal murda' wa bi'sal Fatima." What a good wet nurse is power, and what a wretched weaner. Because once they get on the nipple of power, they just don't want to let go because of all that they can do. And just that feeling of being in that position of power. But it's a wretched weaner. Like this idiot who just got killed. I mean, now he's with his Lord, but when he sent them in, apparently, to the army and to Homs, he said, you can do everything but be merciful. Allahu Alam, but that's what the report was. But now these guys, the defense minister, they have to. Now they're in the graves. They're going to be answerable for everything they did. So, but that's the reality of those people, and you don't want to be around them. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu said, if I fasted, if I stayed in prayer all night, لو قمت الليل كله وصمت النهار كله ولم أبغض أهل المعصية. He said, لم ينفعني ذلك من شيء. None of that would be a benefit. If you pray all night, fast all day, but you don't despise disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why when you see it, Allahumma innahu lamunkar ankarna. Like Ibn Umar said, Allahumma innahu lamunkar ankarna. Walau qadarna la ghayyarna. That's the least that you should do when you see it. Oh Allah, it's a munkar, and if I was able, I would change it. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ الْإِنْكَارُ فِي الْقَلْبِ. Just to reject it in the heart.